Hey everybody, I just wanted to say thanks for taking the time out of your day to come and check out our project. As you can see, it's on Facebook. We're part one of Facebook, and we'll get into just exactly what that goes over in a little bit. For the project, Ashley, myself, Jenlyn, and Kawi all, were group members, and they all contributed. We all contributed in different ways. Basically, what we used to collaborate on this entire project were purely online methods or methods through technology. We started through Google Plus. We formed our group there and basically messaged each other through there and through Gmail and exchanged contact information. And from there, we just basically texted each other. We never had to meet up, so we were able to do this entire project purely through technical means, which was actually pretty convenient because we didn't have to go drive somewhere, meet at Starbucks for a couple hours and, jam in as much work as we could during that time period. We were basically able to work on this all at our leisure and, at our own pace, which came up pretty convenient because all of us had kind of different schedules. I know mine is personally crazy. I don't know the specifics of everyone else's schedule, but I'm sure we're all quite busy. So that was basically how we did it. Then for the PowerPoint, Kawi sent the invitation out and invited everyone to basically work on their own slides. And we decided that I was going to do the voiceover, so they kind of helped me out with my parts and created all the slides and everything. And I just went over the whole chapter and took notes down of what I wanted to say. Probably none of which I'll read off of because I'm terrible at reading, at least on the spot, that is. And then we put it together. The whole project came together on Google Drive, their slides, which is their version of PowerPoint, and then I used GarageBand to do the voiceover. Alright, so getting into our project, we're starting with basically the introduction to the chapter, which is also an introduction to Facebook. Talks about the creation of it. As many of you know, it was created by Mark Zuckerberg. He was currently a sophomore, or at the time he was a sophomore at Harvard University. And how it came to be was he found himself so bogged down with all this schoolwork that he realized he didn't have the time to study for a class. So ironically, instead of having the time to study, he created a website and invited all of his classmates. And what it was meant for was basically a collaboration method to put all of their artwork and information into one spot that they could all use to study. I found it quite ironic that Facebook originated as a study tool, because today it seems to be one of the biggest hindrances and distractions from studying. But that's just a side note. So after he created the website, and within hours it became full of all the content and artwork that everyone needed to know to get a good grade in that class. I believe the class was Art in the Time of Augustus, and he was able to get an A using that study method. It kind of proved to be futile, and then because later that year he dropped out to take on the venture of Facebook, and that was probably one of the best decisions he made, if not the best decision, and it basically became one of the biggest companies or the largest firms in the tech industry worldwide. So a couple little interesting facts you see on the slide. 1 in 7 people has a Facebook account, and that's worldwide. And that's pretty amazing considering that 20% of the population is essentially ruled out, as China blocks Facebook and they control 20%, or not control, that's debatable, but they host 20% of the world's population. And as you'll see later, this kind of is a little bit of a window into how much or how profitable they are and how much money they make. Their daily traffic is 3 times larger than the Super Bowl, and we know the Super Bowl, at least the commercials, are the most expensive ads you can buy. And if they have 3 times the viewership every day, you can imagine the kind of money that they're gonna rake in. So, getting more into the rise of Facebook. Along with the exponential rise or the exponential growth of any firm, especially like that of Facebook's, there's a lot of growing concerns. the biggest one with them was, among privacy, was that they wouldn't be able to make the transition from the desktop to the mobile platform. And, that was pretty hard for investors and critics. They were really skeptical if they were going to be able to do that and take advantage of that. And you know, they they encountered a lot of offers because of their growth. It looked really attractive to investors because of the growth and what they were doing to ensure that they would be successful. It was really attractive to them because there was very little risk. And in the world of investing, the less risk and the bigger reward, or any situation that presents that kind of opportunity, is really rare to come by. Usually there's a direct relationship with risk and reward. Risk, the amount of risk and the amount of reward. So I guess I was right in saying that, the higher the risk, the higher the reward. But in this case, the reward was higher and the risk was significantly lower. And that's why, as you see on the screen or on the slide, there's multiple offers from different companies, and all of which were turned down except for the Microsoft, because they invested in the company instead of trying to buy it out. And then that's really impressive. So moving on to the second part of the rise, as I mentioned before, the concerns. They did struggle for a while from, in the 2010 to 2011 time frame, when their profits fell from $1 billion to $53 million. And they're still turning a profit, but that kind of drop is very significant. So it left a lot of people worried, and I kind of took that as that was their growing pain time, or that transition between the desktop to mobile. Because if you look at it, the most prominent thing that came out in 2010, 2011 was the iPhone. Well, the iPhone 4, I should say. And that was really when I feel that everything started to make the transition over to the mobile, and largely because of the speed. Before that, with the 3G and the two generations of iPhones before that, the service on it was lackluster, to be nice. It didn't really have the benefits that it advertised with the speed, the actual speed. They advertised it being fast, but in reality it took 30 seconds or a minute to load a page, and that wasn't too big or too popular back then. But when the 4 and the 4S came out, we moved more towards the faster 3G speeds, and then even 4G, which basically laid the foundation and the infrastructure for them to expand to mobile. Because now, with that infrastructure, they would be able to sport or boast kind of the speeds and the data usage or the data draw that Facebook on a mobile phone would create, and the phones could now keep up with that. So a lot of people switched over to mobile, and that was kind of where I see that they struggled a little bit during that time frame, but they were able eventually to capitalize on it. They did very well, especially with those 4 bullet points you see on the bottom. They were able to get profits from the customers. They grew advertising to meet the demand. They capitalized on the mobile platform, and they, the whole time they increased user privacy, which is debatable. I've heard of a few issues, but in general, they always improved, or at least aimed to improve. So, moving on to this slide, why study Facebook? If you would have told me 4 or 5 years ago when, I first started using Facebook that I'd do a project on it, or we'd have to study about it, I kind of would have laughed. Why would we study social media? They frown on it so much in high school and the use of it, but that's more for the distraction side that I was talking about, because realistically, not many people use Facebook for school anymore. It's all social. But when you really look into it, the authors have done a really good job of laying out, the whole picture of Facebook, from the business aspect to the technical aspect to the software to the hardware, and basically the integration of everything. You look at Facebook, you see, the network effects, the externalities that they've been able to create, which are essential to keeping the demand up for Facebook and continuing to be successful. We look at all the different platforms that they were able to capitalize and be successful with, mobile phones, desktops, And then the integration with all these different apps and all these different companies, and you know, we get to study issues of new technologies, privacy issues, and the more recent developments like the ad models, and they're really, really beneficial for anyone in the business field because you get to see what made one of the most successful firms as successful as they are. So that's kind of why it's valuable to study Facebook, at least in my opinion, or the opinion of the groups. So moving on to the next slide, slide 7, Zuckerberg rules, and this to me was one of the more interesting parts because when you see any firm that grows as quickly as Facebook did, a lot of times the founder will relinquish their power to chairman, boards, etc. People who are experienced in that field so that they can ensure that or do everything that they can to be successful. Whereas in this case, it was very rare. It's not unheard of, like we saw it in Google, with the owners maintaining a majority control. But in this case, Zuckerberg was really confident in his own abilities and his own vision. And I think he wanted to maintain that control because he felt he knew what was best for the company. And he ensured that he had the highest stake in the company when they filed for their IPO. As you see on the slide, his ownership stake was at 28%. And while that's not near 50 or a majority per se, he created two types of stocks so that he would with 28% he would maintain the majority voting rights. So he ultimately controlled or had the last say in all of the decisions that were made, which could have gone either way. He could have made some terrible decisions and sunk the firm, but in the end, we can see that he made the right decisions and the right choices, and jumped on the right opportunities and turned down the right opportunities as well to get where he is now. So in the end, I'd definitely say it paid off. We can't doubt that at all with $7 billion annual revenue. But we can't give all of the credit to Zuckerberg. There's always the behind. I can't talk. Don't mind me. There's always the behind the scene people. In this case, it was Sheryl Sandberg, and she is the COO, the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook. And before she came to Facebook, she worked at Google, and before that, she worked as the chief of staff for the Treasury Secretary. I believe his name was Larry Summers. So she had a really solid background before even coming to Facebook, and I think that was the key in helping her to be able to be so successful or as successful, because she already knew what she was doing, and she knew it had to be done to a point. She was a Harvard grad. She also like Zuckerberg. She one of her famous incidents in Harvard was doing a data collection in her economics classes. She downloaded so much data or processed so much data that it basically froze or shut down the Harvard servers. And her and Zuckerberg have quite a bit in common in that sense. But when you look at her freezing or shutting down the servers, you can see that she's doing a lot with big data already, and that was back then. So nowadays she's today in Facebook, she's created these advertising platforms and sales organizations that serve clientele from mom and pop shops all the way up to Fortune 100 companies. And she's also helped steer the firm through multiple crises, and all of which while turning a profit. I mean, the profit jumped in 2010 from $1 billion to 53 million, but nonetheless, that's still a profit. So that in itself is quite impressive. She's kind of viewed as the adult in the firm. I kind of viewed her as like the mom figure. She kept everyone in check. She, made sure what needed to be done was getting done in a timely and efficient manner. And, all these new issues that came up, they were able to basically come up with something to capitalize on it. If you look in business at a SWOT analysis, your main goal is to identify your threats and your weaknesses. But if you can turn your weaknesses into opportunities, then that's you've done everything you can do, and that's essentially what they were able to do. So moving on, this is one of the key things. Well, actually, everything in here is kind of a key thing. That's why it's in here. But I saw this as being the reason that Facebook has been able to, horizontally and vertically expand and basically reach their roots out into all these different markets and all these different apps, and be able to do everything that they've done, and that's the social graph. The social graph, as the book says, is the global mapping of everyone and how they're related, and that's basically big data. They collect all of this data and all of these relationships, and they're able to formulate these algorithms and come up with content that they know you'll like based on who you know, who you're friends with, what pages you like, who you subscribe to, even trends with shopping. I know Google has ads on the side of Facebook, or even Facebook has ads, and if I'll go on Amazon and look up something, then I'll go back to Facebook and there'll be an ad for what I was just looking at, and they know what you like, and it's kind of scary to a point, but it's also quite amazing that they're able to track all of this, process it, and put it into a system of integration that they have, and basically be like Steve Jobs and know what we want before we even know what we want, and it's pretty impressive, and that's why it's been so successful, because you sign onto your Facebook feed and a bunch of content pops up that they know you'll like based on who you talk to, what you do, what you search for, and it's pretty convenient, but they also have to keep maintaining their security and their privacy, because as technology increases, so is the risk for data leakage. We saw WikiLeaks and all these other companies. So what that social graph produced was all of these network effects, and the book describes network effects as the value of a product or service increasing as the number of users increases. And a similar example could be like the iPhone. For example, the iMessaging feature. It works great. It's really convenient, works smoothly, and anyone else that has an iPhone can, use iMessage. But if only 300 people in the entire United States had an iPhone, then what does it matter? What's the likelihood you're going to be friends with one other person that has that feature? But, we look at the sales of the iPhone 6, they sold 10 million units in the first week. And, everyone else, not everyone else, but a lot of people have iPhones. So the network effects of that are that, if most likely someone is going to have an iPhone, being able to message them through iMessage and all the other, integrated features of Apple becomes really useful. And that's the same as Facebook, everyone has Facebook. All the businesses you like are on Facebook, and they have promotions and sales and all of these things specific to Facebook, and then the integration with these other apps, you can sign into how many different applications or websites using your Facebook login, and it just makes it really hard to switch, and that's where switching costs come in. The switching costs for Facebook are huge, and that also ensures them, success in the future if they keep up on the path that they're doing right now, because it's really hard to emulate something of that size, especially with the data created from the social graph. Someone could come on and make a better service than Facebook, but it would take millions of billions of dollars in advertisements and all of that to be able to get them to switch over. We saw Google try with Google Plus, and it's nowhere near as popular as Facebook. Even though there are some features that are better, it's still lacking because of the switching costs. It's going to take a lot from Google to be able to get people to switch over. So next we talk about the Facebook feed, which is what I kind of mentioned earlier, and it's a direct relationship with, or it has a direct relationship with the social graph, because based on content that you've liked or viewed or just gone over, or whatever pages you've gone to, they're able to formulate things that they believe will be of interest to you, and then they put it in your newsfeed. I log on now, and half of the stuff isn't even from friends. It's from these different pages, whatever it is that you look at most, and they put content and most of it's really interesting. At least from in my case, it's all things that I'm interested in. It brings so many new opportunities, not only for consumers but for firms as well, because it links customers or people that you ordinarily wouldn't have met. I mean, I have many friends on the mainland that I've become close with because of Facebook, and I wouldn't be out there meeting these people, and it's really cool, especially for businesses. Small businesses can get their products out with very little, well, relatively very little expenses compared to before Facebook. You'd have to go buy a TV ad, buy print ads, etc., etc. But everyone's on Facebook, so if you get your ad on there, it's quite easy to get some really high numbers of viewers and build customers and just boost everything from sales to client base, which is really effective, and that's been pretty cool from both a consumer and a business standpoint. And they've done a really good job at being able to capitalize on all these new things. And moving on to the next slide, we see a continuation of that as well. Facebook encroaches all. That's the title of the slide, but it's really true. I mean, every new platform or technology or application that came out, they were able to combat it with either their own, a similar version, emulation, or even buying out the firm, as we saw with Instagram. And that was what I think one of the key things with monetizing the mobile, as the book says, that was a really key thing, because they purchased Instagram, and now Twitter's up there too, but in my mind, 2 of the 3 most popular social media sites are now owned by Facebook. And even with Twitter, they emulate Twitter with their content sharing, that model. And they were able to successfully combat all of these. We even saw things like video sharing, and their messaging feature, which I'm sure most of you have. I know I use it. It basically resembles iMessage from Apple. It's extremely similar, and it works well. And as I talked about with the network externalities, everyone has it. Even more so with Facebook than Apple. And then even now we have all of these news organizations and other types of entertainment on there, and there's no real need for magazines or newspapers anymore. I mean, it's all kind of combined into Facebook, which was their goal. And now they're even taking on search, as we see here in slide 13. They did a partnership with Microsoft and Bing, and they're taking on Google with their graph search. Personally, I don't think they're going to be able to accomplish it, because this is basically the reverse of the situation we saw with Google and their version of Facebook. Facebook was the originator, and they were able to get there first and get their position in the market before anyone else could get on and steal, or not steal, but beat them to it, as far as their data collection and everything like that. So Facebook has these gigantic numbers of big data, and they're able to use that and create these algorithms and these systems that can come up with the content we see. And I think that's why Google has struggled, and I think that's why Facebook would struggle with search, because Google is the originator. They have been the originator, and they have been the go-to, and that's why I think it's going to be hard. But Bing now they're doing something cool. They're letting you have a social sidebar. They let you understand and respond to Facebook friend updates and whatever content pops up on your newsfeed while searching, and you can link it to your Facebook page and all of this thing and all of these things. Sorry, and it's all really cool and interesting. But the true test is going to be how useful it proves to be. If it's more useful than using the Google search, or it yields better results, or it's faster, whatever, then you're going to see a lot of people switching. But that's going to be the battle in itself right there, especially when taking on a name like Google. So, moving on to their apps platform. This is where the integration is really spread like wildfire. This is more of a volume instead of quantity, or quantity instead of quality, I should say. There's so many apps that are intertwined with Facebook, and that's just further adding to their compatibility and their network externalities, and just raising their switching costs even more, because the more that is tied into Facebook, the harder it is for anyone to switch, or any new competitor to come up and threaten their business. So right here on slide 14, we have application programming interfaces, or APIs, which are they specify how programs are written to be run with and interact with Facebook. Programmers can write applications inside a user's profile. Developers can charge or offer them for free. They can even run ads, and Facebook lets them keep what they made. So it's really beneficial for not only the app users, but the app developers. Then we can look at how effective it is. There was a lot of apps made for Facebook, or marshaled by Facebook. They actually spearheaded the efforts of 400,000 developers and entrepreneurs, and there were 24,000 apps built for the platform. And we can break that down into 140 new apps that are added each day. And then you look at the statistic of how many people are actually using these apps. It doesn't matter how many are created, but it matters that they're using them. So 95% of Facebook users have installed at least one of the Facebook applications. And that's pretty impressive. I know the most popular one is probably going to be their messaging feature, because they split that off. You can't use that in Facebook anymore. Now it takes you directly to that app. And that's a really high statistic, which is why it's so intriguing for small businesses and developers, because it's so common and they can reach so many people. Especially with the education component tied in with Blackboard, they offered an app that allows posts of data onto Facebook pages, whenever the teacher makes an update. It could be, for example, a new course, a new assignment, or even if they post your grade, you can get a notification through Facebook, which is really convenient. I've used Blackboard and I've never had the link to Facebook set up, but even Blackboard in itself was convenient and easy to use, so I can imagine how much better it would be should I have used the Facebook feature. And then you look at the profitability. Facebook paid out over $2 billion in revenues to these developers, and over 100 of these Facebook developers, they earned over $1 million in 2012, and that's a really, really impressive number, and can really provide to be beneficial to many firms. So we continue on to slide 16. Some more stats. In Q1 of 2013, a quarter of the user base played at least one game. And this relates to the developers, because a lot of these companies aren't just developing, business apps or apps, for communication. A lot of them are games. We see that with things like Farmville or Texas Hold'em Poker or Candy Crush, which I'm sure many people have played here. And, then with any new aspect to the company, you're always going to have concerns. The biggest concern with this was, that apps are more of a fad, or these games are more of a fad, and can be time wasters. I can speak to that personally, because I have many friends, and even myself, I get caught sometimes on Facebook, and I know I don't play games on Facebook, but if I did, I'm sure that would be a huge time waster for me, because in reality these games are just to occupy time. They're not really for productivity. So a lot of people won't invest in things like that, and it can be a really volatile market for developers, because you might create a game and it could go well for a couple of days, and then it just starts taking a turn for the worse. I know we saw that with Flappy Bird. So it can be a really, really hard area to be successful in. But when you are successful, you can see that reflected in definitely your earnings. Then we move on to slide 17, which just has a quote from a venture capitalist, and it says that Facebook is God's gift to developers. Never has the path from a good idea to millions of users been shorter. And that just speaks to why Facebook and everything about it is so convenient and so profitable, because you can get in touch with so many new customers and do so many things that help boost your productivity, that it's become a really integral part of life today. Both of the business culture, of social life, of all aspects of it. In reality. So moving on to the next part, which ties in pretty perfectly with that. This slide is titled "I majored in Facebook," which is actually pretty interesting. It would be a pretty cool thing to major in. So, Professor B.J. Fogg taught it, and it was a programming class. There was about 75 students, and what they did was they built a series of applications within 10 weeks. And these applications received over 16 million installs. By finals week, several of the apps developed by the students, for example, one of them was Perfect Match. They received millions of users. The class applications collectively generated about $1 million in ad revenue. And, at least 3 companies were formed from Professor Fogg's course. And that's pretty amazing. You do a project in school, and it results in, a job or the creation of a new business, and a successful one at that. So, I think back to, when I see this, I think back to the beginning of the semester when we went over the statistics of, some of the most in-demand jobs, and a lot of those jobs weren't even in existence 5 or 10 years ago. So I'm sure here shortly people are going to be able to major, not specifically in Facebook per se, but I'm sure something for, studying social media is going to be out. And I already know it's really involved in marketing. And I'm sure that's going to be a new field in marketing, would be advertisement of, firms or companies or products through social media, because it's become the kind of all-in-one solution for marketing. There's not much room for print ads anymore, magazines even, newspapers, it's all intertwined into Facebook, which is pretty cool if you think about it, but, if it's not handled right, it could really take a turn for the worse. Then we look at, next, the Open Graph, which allows developers to link their web pages and different apps into the social graph, and they do this by, they can put a like button on their page, which links it to their Facebook site. They can accept users' credentials. You don't have to make a new account, and that's actually really beneficial, because I can't remember that many passwords. I really can't. So if you are able to use your Facebook password for, tens of 20s of different sites, then it's really convenient. And then the firms who are using that gain the access to the data collected through the social graph, and they can use that data to make new product recommendations, or just spark new interest in fields that will benefit them and consumers. So that's another example of how they continue to capitalize on all these new avenues and vertically and horizontally expand. And then we move on to the next slide. Strategic concerns. We look at all these third-party developers that can create apps that intertwine with Facebook, and they can pull data. You see things in all the Samsung products, which I have a bunch of, Vizio TVs, any sort of TV or gaming console, computer, anything. You can create an app on that platform that ties into Facebook, and then you get the benefit of all that data, which is quite beneficial for everyone. It's really convenient not to have an account for this, an account for that, and have 10 different accounts, when Facebook is really taking all these different aspects and combining them into one and making it easier for us. And I think that's kind of the goal of studying MIS, to be able to create a system, use all of these different software products and hardware products, and create a system that pulls everything together and makes it easier for you, because that is, the purpose of technology, to make our lives easier. Continuing on the strategic concerns on the next slide, because Facebook has opened up access to, these users and all the content that comes with it, the importance of, protecting all these assets of the network effects and the switching costs are still going to be just as important, if not more important, because if you don't protect this and you allow all this data out, especially to someone in the wrong hands, it's going to be a huge problem, and could actually be the reason for the demise of a company. Facebook's infrastructure is huge, but because it's so huge and because hosting all this content is really expensive, this can basically cause what in economics is called the free rider problem, which is where firms will mooch off of all of Facebook's infrastructure without offering much in return. And it's not too big of an issue for smaller companies that aren't going to take much. But if you had, Walmart, for example, hopping on and making billions of dollars off their advertising, and they're not really giving much back to Facebook in return, a big problem is going to arise, especially because that'll tie directly into privacy, because if they're not making much off of this, they're not going to be able to have the capital to throw back into research and development to constantly improve it. So it's kind of a fine balance, and there are definitely always going to be security concerns. And like I said earlier in the presentation, they're going to be much more, or much larger, issues in the future than they are now. Which isn't to say now it's not really an issue, because it is. But with the ever-changing business landscape and the privacy on the internet, it's going to continue to grow. So moving on to our last slide, we look at what it takes to run Facebook. Facebook's cloud. It's similar to Google in the sense that they have all these server farms, and all of this data and these operating systems and everything that has to do with running it is intertwined throughout these servers. And much of what powers the site, as the book went over, was the OSS, which that service runs on the Linux operating system, and then you have all their content delivery networks, and it's really interesting to see how they tied everything together to be able to support the kind of traffic they get. Facebook gets 50 million requests per second, and being able to answer that takes a lot of computing power, and I believe the book said it takes well over 15 terabytes of RAM. And that right there is quite amazing, because if you look at, what some of the top of the line computers today, they only come with 16 or 32 gigs of RAM. So 15 terabytes, you can tell that's a large amount of data. And we can already get a picture of that because of the raw amount of people and traffic that Facebook encounters. So in conclusion, it's been really interesting to study Facebook. I didn't really understand why we were going to do it at first, because in my mind it was just a social media site. But when you really break everything down, you get basically a window where you can look into Facebook and the entire organization, everything from how the business side is run to all the different hardware and software solutions they're able to not only have but intertwine in a way that is so beneficial and continue to formulate all of these new aspects of the business and branch out into all these new areas and markets. And once you have the opportunity to look over that, you really get a picture of just how they became so successful. And as a business major, that's really, really beneficial, because the only way to better yourself or make sure your company is successful is by looking at what the successful people did and trying to model it for yourself. So being able to study this has been a really cool experience, and I'm glad everybody got the chance to witness our presentation or tune in for it, and I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. So thanks for watching, and look forward to seeing everyone else's presentations. Thanks.